Hi and welcome back to Bounce Forward. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm recording this podcast, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to elders past and present. Today, I'm so excited to be sharing with you a bonus guest episode. Pallavi Sharda is a prolific Bollywood actress, but she is also my childhood friend, my ride or die, which makes today very special. Pallavi is not only an actor, but also a producer, dancer, and speaker with a uniquely global career that has seen her successfully lead projects in India, Australia, the UK, and the US. After graduating with a Bachelor of Laws, Arts, Media and Communications, and a Diploma of Modern Languages, she headed for Mumbai, where she became the first Indian Australian to star in Bollywood films. I've personally loved watching Pallavi thrive and am in awe of her bravery in packing her bags to move to India to pursue her dreams. Welcome, Pallavi Sharda, to Bounce Forward. So good to have you here.
Thank you.
I'm so excited. Now, you're a trailblazer because you packed your bags, you moved to India, determined to break into Bollywood, and you did. What was it like filming your first film, your first Bollywood film? Because I feel like you've had this amazing career here in Australia and people may not know that you've already had an amazing career in India as a Bollywood actress.
Yeah, it's a good question, actually, because I think you're right. When I've come back recently, everyone's sort of like, where's this girl turned up from? You know, it's sort of like just plucked an asteroid that's fallen from the sky. But no, I grew up in Melbourne, was born in Perth, sort of lived here. So I'm very Australian to people when they see me or meet me, but there's like, where does she come from? And so, yeah, I left for India when I was about 20 and it was my childhood dream to be an actress. And I was a classical Indian dancer growing up and I just wanted to find somewhere to put this art form. And India had this cinema industry where you could be an actor, but you also needed to be a great dancer.
Yes.
And so I was like, that's me. You know, that's what I need to do. And I was very heavily inspired by Indian films growing up. That was where I saw myself. It was the music we listened to at our house. It was the music that we danced to at community functions. It really informed my identity to a large degree, particularly outside of the mainstream of, you know, going to school and school sports and all of the very Australian stuff, which I loved, but it was only one part of me. It was the conditioned part of me. It wasn't the innate part. So I went to India with my bags packed, as you said, and it was really hard and it was grueling. And, you know, it took a few years. I was sort of a theatre actor and, the story of that first few years is its own podcast, I think. But my first big film was a film that came out 10 years ago called Beecham. And it was a film that was sort of pitted as this big blockbuster film. It was a massive flop, by the way, which is also hilarious. It was like, you know, one of those films where it's like, you know, Mission Impossible. They're going, it's the biggest release of the year, but it just is a little bit disappointing.
Yeah, because they've pumped it too much.
They pumped it too much. It was kind of like that, but it was still a great feat to be in it. But what was, you know, really hard, I think even first off, or even before that, I'd been on sets, like that I wasn't the lead actress on. It's just a lot of hard, grueling physical work.
That's what I was going to ask you. Is there a lot of pressure on you? And there are stories about Bollywood dancers being absolutely grueled. Yeah. Is it grueling? Like, what's a day like?
Oh, gosh. Yes.
Physically.
So I'd say your days, there's no limit on you. I mean, a 12-hour day is like the shift, but sometimes you're doing 16, 17 hours. I think my second movie, I played a dancer that in a film that was set in 1895. And I think we did a 72-hour shift in the sense of I would just go sleep for a few hours and come back. But like if someone was always on the set just to get it done, because it was like it would have taken 5 days, but we didn't have 5 days. So we had to do it in 3 days because the song sequence can take anywhere from 3 to 7 days to shoot, you know, given the fact that you're often outdoors in like big locations and there's a lot of background dancers. So it's a huge production. I mean, I think the way that you shoot in India is something I've not seen anywhere anywhere else, even on big budget productions. Like I did Tom and Jerry, which is a huge, you know, Hollywood film. It's a studio film, but I still was in this massive set, Warner Brothers Studios in London, being like, this isn't even as nearly as big as the sets that I've worked on in India.
Wow.
So yeah, it's tough, but it's a lot of fun.
It's a lot of fun, and you have made some amazing films and some amazing dance sequences and even directed some yourself.
Yeah.
Like, I've just loved watching you. Tell me about your health practices in your lifestyle.
Well, I think it's really varied in the sense of my schedule is so up in the air and I travel so much. And I have to say the one thing I do struggle with is consistency because, you know, you change time zones and then all of a sudden you're jet lagged and you're out and motivation wanes and things like that. But the things that I tend to come back to are diet and yoga and meditation. And the reason I say come back to, it's sort of, you know, when all chaos is erupting, I just go, these are three mainstays that will get me back on track no matter what.
Yes.
And movement through meditation through movement, which is yoga, but also my dance practice. And when I say that, it's no longer a rigorous classical Indian dance practice that I used to have when I was younger, which is the style of dance I was trained in, but it's more free-form movement and feeling into my body and just moving energy around in a way to kind of shift moods and elevate mood.
Yeah.
But yeah, diet is a big one for me in the recent, you know, in the recent past. It's become even more important because something I'm learning about and advocating for is Ayurveda, which is the Indian medicinal tradition. And Ayurveda is all about preventative medicine and making sure that we are taking care of our health before we get sick.
I love that.
And it doesn't yet, disease is, you're preventing disease basically. And I have two autoimmune disorders. One is alopecia and the other is lichen planus. And these were both disorders that I started to feel when I was in India because of the immense stress I was under.
The stress.
Yes. It's been a very stressy decade.
Yes.
So, you know, the pressure I put myself under to go and make it in India with no odds in my favour was a pretty intense thing to do. And actually in the same way to come back to Australia and say, now I'm going to do it here and start all over again where the odds were also not stacked in my favour for different reasons. You know, it's been a wild ride, and so there's a lot of pressure I've put myself under to penetrate these industries at a work level. But there's so much emotional angst in what I do because you're an actress, you're putting yourself on the line. Like there's a very fine line between Pallavi, the actor or the professional, and me, the person.
Yes.
Because it's not like you go and you're fighting someone else's case as a lawyer and you can switch off at night. It's like, no, it's still your body, your brain, your soul.
Yes.
And so I think the angst and the stress that you feel when you're a creator, it's so personal.
Yes.
And
it affects your health.
Yeah, absolutely. And therefore it affects your health. And so I started to feel these things very young, and I was a very healthy younger person, so I didn't know how to cope with getting sick. And slowly I realised that it was what I was putting into my body and it was my lifestyle that was contributing. It's like, okay, I can't change the fact that I have a stressful job. I can't change the fact that I travel a lot. I can't change the fact that there's a lot of pressure on me, but I can change what I put into my body. I can change whether or not my nervous system is able to self-regulate based on the amount of meditation I have in my life or the amount of mood-enhancing activities that I do. And so for maybe I'd say like the last 5 years particularly, or 5 to 7, it drops in and out. You know, sometimes you're on a hectic schedule and everyone's sort of like partying and going out and you want to be a part of the fun, and so you have a few late nights and all of a sudden the routine's gone and you're like then hating yourself.
Yes.
So that happens, but I've come back to it enough times now to go, this is my life and my way of living. So yeah, it's a very long-winded answer, but there's a few things in there. You know.
Yeah, definitely. And like what are some of the things with your diet that help you, especially with your nervous system?
Well, I think, you know, Ayurveda has a lot of it's all based on it's almost like a farm to table kind of way of eating, right? So in our house in Melbourne, where I grew up, and we still have that home, we have like a really beautiful garden filled with fresh vegetables. We basically make food from the garden. My mum is an exceptional Ayurvedic cook.
Yes.
And it's like a talent that's...
I have tasted.
Yes.
Amazing.
It's amazing.
Yes.
And I get fresh, and you've tasted it. It's like made from... There's a lot of turmeric, which is anti-inflammatory in the food. There's the right amount of salt. It's not overly salty. It's not overly spiced. And it's often vegetarian, the food that we eat, and it's about making sure that the nutrients from the vegetables are still alive because they're not overcooked. There are various ways of preparing the food so that we're not killing the nutrients in the food, whereas I think if you go and have Indian food out in the restaurant, you're probably getting like something that's really curried. There's a lot of salt in it. There's probably a lot of cream and all of these other artificial sweeteners. That's not traditional Indian food, particularly from the region that my parents come from in North India. And then obviously there's South Indian food that has its own medicinal quality, and it's different kind of spices, curry leaves, mustard seeds. But it's really about the freshness of the food and making sure you're eating things which are freshly cooked every day. You're not eating – in Ayurveda they say you shouldn't even eat the same meal twice. It shouldn't go in the fridge and come out. It's already lost a lot of its nutrient.
Yes.
And it's prana. And we talk about prana. If you go to a yoga studio in Melbourne, everyone will be talking about prana and chi and the life force and the energy. There's energy in food. Yes. And it's that energy that we are ingesting. Yeah. And so you don't want to kill that energy. You don't want to freeze it. You don't want to you're eating stale food basically, and that's the idea. And things it's such a big topic, so I'm kind of skimming over it.
Of course.
Ayurveda, the concept also is that we have doshas. There are 3 doshas, the Vata, Pitta and Kapha, and they determine your bodily makeup. And so I'm Vata and I'm Pitta dominant, so it means I have more fire and more wind in my body, and there are foods. It's a science. It's a whole system where there are certain foods that aggravate that. And the idea is that all your 3 doshas that exist within us should be in balance. So it's all about finding balance and harmony. And so if I have a skin disorder, it's like they'll know that that's your pitta, which is being aggravated. So you have too much fire in your body right now. This is the food that will actually help that. And it's, if I went on a panchakarma earlier this year, which is a very intense Ayurvedic retreat and cleansing process. So I learned a lot, and I went a lot deeper into the practice of it. But it's basically a cleanse. Yes. I drank ghee for a week in the mornings, and ghee is a lipid. Yes. And I know you do a lot of stuff with like coconut oil and, and the binding of how it binds to toxins when you do your oil pulling and things like that. So ghee has a similar quality, and the idea is you drink a little bit of ghee every morning and it binds to the toxins in your body, and then you go through a purge in week 2 where you have a laxative and it takes out the toxins that have been stuck in your digestive tract for years sometimes. And so the basic concept is when our digestive fire is working, when the word in Hindi is Agni, the fire is working. And you've always talked about the furnace, you know. So it's very similar conceptually.
The metabolism and the furnace.
Yeah. And it's that science, but we're just making sure that the food that we put in is very clean and it's medicinal. So food is medicine at all times.
Yeah, I love that. So you have a lot of fans, Pallavi. You do. And we met one as you were walking into the studio. And whenever I'm with you, there are so many fans on the streets. Pallavi, seeking you out. People look up to you. What advice would you have for someone who's standing at the bottom of a fitness mountain and they're looking at you as this amazing dancer, someone who has incredible stamina and endurance, and you've made it? What advice would you have for them?
I'd say take care of your body. I'd say your body is your temple, and that's not just a saying, it's or an adage, it's true. And I feel like sometimes I've not failed, but I didn't do as good a job of it because I also didn't have the training when I was younger. I grew up in a classical Indian dance tradition at a time where we were just sort of like the community doing dance classes in someone's garage. There weren't fitness instructors. There weren't people telling us about our diet, about recovery, about warming up. So I really did hurt my body quite a lot when I was young, and I did rely on adrenaline and talent to get me through. And I think when I went to India, I did the same thing many times, and I didn't have the background in how to train as an athlete in order to keep that consistent as a practice. And it's only through my yoga training that I've understood the fundamentals of consistency and form and things like that, which, you know, people would be very surprised by if they knew my dance background. But I think now if you were trying to find your way up that fitness mountain, it's baby steps and it's consistency. We hear this so much, but I have to practice that and remind myself all the time, even today. I'm not at the top of the fitness mountain right now, and consistency is the main one. Every time I've just said, no, I'm going to wake up and no matter what, I'm going to go down and move my body. Mood improves, your body starts to loosen up and the ailments start to kind of fade away.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Pallavi, have you always had a positive relationship with your body and with food?
I think I did when I was young. I think when I went to India and became an actress, it deteriorated. There was a lot of body shaming in the industry that I moved into, and I'd never experienced that before. For all the listeners, Tiff and I have actually known each other since we were at school. So it's a little so before I went to India, I remember Tiff was the person that I sought out to say, they want me to be thinner. I don't know what to do. And Tiff also would be the person to testify to the fact that I used to have a very big sweet tooth. I would reach for a croissant and a muffin and
both of us suffer this. Yes.
and not worry about it. And I didn't know that that was harmful or I had never had a problem with that or guilted myself around that until I went to India for the first time on a recce trip, and they told me that I was fat. And I wasn't.
And you've never been not
fat.
For a day.
Yeah, exactly. But I was, not always the thinnest I've ever been or the fittest I've ever been, because it would fluctuate. And I knew that when I was training, I was on, or when I was not, I was off, and it was fine. But I was all of a sudden under the microscope, and I didn't understand that I had to fit into this very particular archaic mold of what it is to be, a desirable woman. It was a very sexist, patriarchal environment where, you had to be a certain way. And it was also an era where it was that very stick-thin model body was being touted as the norm.
Yes.
It's like that, what they called in the 90s heroin chic, that was back. And I was confused because I would have a dancer's body.
You're athletic.
Yes, exactly. And people used to almost gaslight me because I was muscular. I was big, And I remember one director saying, oh, what are you, a footballer? And I was like, sorry, what? And he said, look at your legs because I have really big quads.
You're strong.
And I was like, I'm a dancer and I'm powerful. But it's that kind of speak which starts to get to you. I was very young, so you start to second guess your own self-belief and your own ideas around it. So I would say I had a pretty destructive time for a while there, and I would, had a really destructive relationship with food because all of a sudden food was something to be feeling guilty about. So I would sometimes binge eat and then, I'd put on weight, and then there'd be a cycle of really feeling a lot of disdain about myself. And then if something didn't go well, I could blame myself for not listening to everyone, or not maybe they were right. And so it was a really harmful cycle. And I think I probably, the same time that I realized how much I needed to get into a yoga and meditation practice was when my relationship with food and my body really improved. Also because there was consistency. All of a sudden I had my body back. It felt like I was in my own body. It wasn't yo-yoing around me,
Yes, you were in control.
Exactly. And I also, because of the autoimmune disorders, I had steroid injections for a while in my scalp, and no one told me about the side effects. And one of the side effects of steroids is that you put on a lot of weight and you almost become quite deformed in your facial structure because it was around my head. So for years while I was a screen actress, I was suffering through that and didn't realise that was what was causing it. Yeah. So you're losing your hair, you're getting the injection to fix the hair, and then you're putting on weight, and then you're being gaslit for putting on weight. And you're like, well, I'm trying not to be bald in your movie. Yeah. So I was my early 20s were pretty stressed out for that reason. And so, yeah, I feel like my wellness journey and my journey towards an inner sanctity has been almost parallel with my journey towards career enhancement as an actor. Yeah. You know, they're just as important as one another. In fact, maybe living in my body and being, happy in the way that I move around as a human being every day, that takes precedence over, what's my next film role.
Sounds so tough.
Yeah.
How did you get through those toughest days? Like, what did you learn to get through those toughest days?
I think one of the things that I've learnt is that shame is a really harmful thing. And I think, I was from a model migrant community and, we did well at school as kids, and you were kind of, got a gold
You did really well. You jumped levels. Yeah. You were in my sister's grade. Then you jumped levels with scholarship.
Yeah.
Incredibly well. You have a law degree.
Yeah. And so I think what that did is that put a lot of pressure on me to keep achieving, and that's not very healthy all the time. Like, I remember I was 16 when I started uni, and that's weird, A.
That's crazy.
B, like, everyone was coming back from gap years and stuff, so they were like 3 years older than me all of a sudden. And I remember looking at them being like, you can go in a gap year? That's so cool. But now my whole life is pretty much a gap year because I just, I'm a very free-spirited person. Yeah. But I've learnt to exist in that freedom, whereas I think I put a lot of pressure on myself and I shamed myself out of living in a free-spirited way when I was younger. I've always been free-spirited.
Yes.
But I always felt like it had to be in conjunction with kicking certain goals, and that was how I could justify it. But there's really none of that's all artificial. That's just made up stuff. And so I think, I'm forgetting your question now. I'm just rambling. But
what advice would you give to yourself back then? When you were 16 and you're trying to kick the goals?
Yeah, take it easy. I mean, I have to say I was still, you've known me all that time. Like, I was still happy and jovial and not stressed out. But there was an underlying pressure. At one stage I did 7 subjects at uni in the semester, which is madness because I needed to get to Bombay and be an actress, because if I didn't do that then I would never do it. So none of these things matter. I think our school systems here can often teach us that, there's a hierarchy to how we have to live. And again, bringing my culture into it, migrants often feel pressure to do well in the society that they have come to. And we feel pressure to do well for our parents who have made all these sacrifices to be here.
Yes.
And you want to come good. Like, you don't want to be in a situation where your parents are enjoying life less than they were had they not moved, because it was pretty tough for my parents when they moved. Not as in, they were very educated. They came from privileged backgrounds, but it's still hard to start from scratch in a country.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you want to make their journey worth it. And you want to come good for their journey, and you're pioneering a space for your community. So there's all these other levels that come in when you have dual heritage, and I know most Australians do now, and so that's a really real thing that I want to get out there, is that we're all kind of in the same boat and everyone's feeling it. And I think if we dissipate that aspect of making it, quote unquote, if no one can see me, but I'm doing quotation marks, because there's no such thing really, we're just humans existing in this beautiful
in the
world.
Be healthy, look after yourself.
Absolutely. And just be loving to one another.
Yeah, take the pressure off.
Stop competing with yourself, with other people. Anyway, this could be a TED Talk.
Yeah. Pallavi, thank you so much for joining me today. I loved seeing you. I haven't seen you in how long
6
now?
months.
6 months.
I know.
It's too much.
I know, absolutely.
Too much. So thank you for coming in and being my guest today.
Thank you so much, Tiff.
Having Pallavi in the studio was so exciting for me. Her energy is absolutely infectious and she does look after her body, and she has learnt so much over her journey, especially about the importance of meditation and that food is medicine. I just love that. Check her out on Instagram at Pallavi Sharda. I love talking to you and bringing you these episodes of Bounce Forward. So if you love this episode, please like and review it on your podcast app, wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening and happy days.